So I am a mad adventurer and traveler to begin with, and I will always take the opportunity to, as she said, adventure and travel wherever I can. The Marum Center for Marine Science and Marine Studies in northern Germany is one of the great meccas of marine science in general, and I am a marine micropaleontologist. It would be kind of the equivalent of MIT for an engineering student. So of course every marine science student wants to do something affiliated with Marum. And when I started my PhD, I was introduced to one of the faculty who works there through recommendation of a colleague, and they said you should absolutely talk with each other and see if you can mutually benefit each other's research. I did a 3-month internship there in 2013 and swiftly concluded, yes, all of this, lots more, please. And we decided that another year or so of study there would mutually benefit both my research and my supervisor's research, so I applied for Fulbright starting in 2013.
Hi everyone, just a quick introduction. My name is Rue. I did the Fulbright program in Spain. I was drawn to Fulbright because I grew up in an Iranian-American household, so learning about international relations and telling stories that broke stereotypes were extremely important to me. And when I was at USF, that's actually where, through the Honors College, I had learned about the Fulbright program. I made an appointment with Ms. Chambers and I went in and I said, hey, I know I want to go to graduate school, I want to study PR. What are some options that I have out there? And we spent a lot of time and we were looking through different programs, and as soon as I found the Fulbright program, and especially Senator Fulbright's mission and his values, it aligned a lot with mine, and that's when I knew, aha, I have to apply into this program, and thankfully it ended up working out.
So one of the things that Heather, you said early on is the time that it takes to prepare a Fulbright application, and I can certainly second and third that in terms of how long it takes to prepare one. So I'm wondering if the panelists could comment on how long it took them in terms of when you started your application, and sort of giving also a sense of what that process was like too in terms of applying.
I can start again. So my research with Ms. Chambers probably began, I wrote down in 2016. So I was just doing an investigative search, what countries would be appropriate for me, that don't have the language requirement, that would still be an immersive experience, and I came up with a list and spent the next year researching off and on. And so I landed upon Norway because it has a nearly 100% literacy rate, a phenomenal education system that I could learn about and translate and bring back to the United States. So probably from spring of 2017, about March, until that application deadline in October, I was writing consistently about 12 drafts of each of my essays. Revision is very important to me. I did not apply for Fulbright from USF, but I applied from my undergraduate institution. And the way that it worked for me is that I had spent a semester abroad. I wanted to return to India, so that was high on my list. I had the good fortune of being involved in an undergraduate research program that ran through the summer before my senior year. And the project that I worked on during that entire summer became the springboard for my Fulbright application. So I got the idea, I worked on it through the summer, I began thinking about drafts, and I was fortunate to recruit a few faculty members at my undergraduate institution who really helped me revise, refine, and really tell the story of what I wanted to do in the research, as well as who I was and why this experience would be important for me and for my development and what I could bring to it. So again, it took several months. But I'm not sure how many drafts.
So I was a little bit in the same sort of boat. I had a very specific country in mind, I had a very specific institute in mind, and I had a very specific supervisor in mind, so it was very focused for me from that point of view. I will say one of the biggest challenges as a Fulbrighter was not actually dealing with life in the country itself, it was dealing with prepping the application, because I consider myself a very decent writer, but I had to keep reminding myself I'm a scientific writer, and if anybody in this room is a science major, you know that scientific journal writing is very weird. It's run-on sentences with very clipped speech, and it's very technical, and I do not want to know how many drafts all of the Lawrence had to suffer through in my application. They actually sent off my writing to somebody else, and he basically wrote back and said, I don't have a clue what she's talking about. I would encourage you to start early. I spent almost a year writing my application, revising all of my awesome science down to a more communicable form, and trying to convey how awesome it would be to do this kind of research. And if you are a scientific writer, get somebody who is not a scientific person to read it for you. I had my housemate at the time read it for me because she was a music major, and she could take something like a piece of paper that said, I study the stable isotopic composition of planktonic foraminifera, and say, okay, English please. So absolutely start early and get multiple parties to read your paper.
So I have a little bit of an unusual case. I started my application in July and it was due in October, but to be fair, I didn't really know that that process had existed, and my uncle was diagnosed with a rare form of leukemia, and I know that sounds very cliche, but I was like, I've got one life to live, I need to do this application process. So from July to October, I counted last night, I had at least 20 drafts in my Google Doc of my personal statement and my statement of grant. And the biggest thing that I can recommend to you is that, remember, in the Fulbright process, you don't have a face-to-face interview. So think about preparing for an interview, right? You put on the right clothes, hopefully you research about the company, you go in, you can make your impression. But the Fulbright application is different because, like she was saying, all they see is a piece of paper. And so that piece of paper needs to convey your story. And so again, this was another reason I fell in love with the Fulbright program, because I had to convey my brand on a story. And I will never forget the most important lesson that I learned in this process that I think you can take away from: you have to be open to criticism and you have to be open to constructive feedback. And I'll never forget that I got an email from Ms. Chambers, and it was revisions from 2 different professors at USF. And one was nice, it was good, I was like, okay, good. And then the other one it wasn't mean, but it was, like, I did not think, I was like, the way that I conveyed myself, I felt very proud of my application, but then when I went back and I looked, I was like, wow, I don't convey what I'm trying to tell about myself. So I went back with a lot of mumbling and grumbling, but I went back and I said, okay, what is it that I want to say? And then I was do-do-do-do-do-do. And then I sent it to Ms. Chambers, and she sent back immediately, wow, Rue, this is amazing. And I was like, okay. So lesson learned here is that you've got to be open to feedback. You need to set aside time, whether that's a year or 3 months. Just know you're going to have to constantly revise this. You probably have classes, you probably have other applications. You need to make the time for it. And also invest in your network. Ask people to read about your application, what they know about you. I did a very unconventional way of my application. I'm a very visual learner, so I wrote everything down on a whiteboard and words that would describe me, what I was aiming for, and that really helped me put together the pieces of the puzzle.
Thank you, Rue. So the goal of the Fulbright program is to promote mutual understanding. It's to get people to talk to each other, to communicate with each other. And so that's really at the heart or a core of a Fulbright application. So for Rue and Elizabeth and Holly, could you talk a little bit about how you interacted and engaged with the culture and the community in your host country? You can certainly speak about your engagement project that you all did, or whether it was through your research or your study, but give us a sense of what you did, who you spoke with, and sort of what you took away from that true exchange that happened. So Holly, I'll start with you because you're looking at me.
I think this is probably, I mean, really the heart of what my experience was, because I was in country for 10 and a half months during my Fulbright, and I had the very good fortune of being matched with a couple of people who helped me. One was a Fulbrighter from India who'd been to the United States. So when I first landed up in the city where I would be studying, he was the one who welcomed me and helped me get oriented, and I stayed in touch with his family throughout the whole year. He is a professor at an Indian Institute of Management, the very premier study institution in India. And then I had an advisor in the local university who probably, it seemed to me, looked at me and said, "Oh dear, this young American woman, how will I keep her safe and happy?" And he came up with the idea that, okay, I will find her accommodation in the university women's hostel. And so I ended up in a dorm compound with a wall around it, where there were about 500 Indian women who were studying in that university. I was the only foreign student in the dorm. So I had, basically 24-hour engagement. I mean, we were locked in at nighttime for our safety. So, but I formed really incredible friendships with people through that experience. And that wasn't even what my formal research was. So, I stayed there, I lived there, I talked with people. I, drank lots of tea with them and learned how to cook on little cook stoves that you could illegally rig up in a dorm room there. I learned with them how to survive eating in the hostel mess, where the dal that they served was often more like yellow water than really dal. I'm still in touch with many of those women that I lived with there. They've become scholars and professionals in their own right. Some of them are now lawyers or judges or faculty in universities. So that was an incredibly enriching part of the experience, as well as the opportunity to be able to go around to different parts of the city to hear the narratives about, what are the places that are remembered in the city, why are they remembered, how are they commemorated, what are the structures, how do people engage with them, all that stuff that was part of my formal research project. So I think that immersion has the opportunity both for, really substantive formal research, as well as day-to-day engagements that can really be, lasting and meaningful.